Hello, welcome. This is part of some ongoing research into Fulcanelli to show that I've been doing or started doing on the Patreon. So if you're interested in that, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/the Juan on Juan podcast. We're going to be diving deep into Fulcanelli, and this was part of it. You have Patrick Riviere, who was a pupil of Eugene Consaliet, who was the pupil of Fulcanelli, and he is in this, and allegedly there was a transmutation that happens in this video of substances into gold. So you be the judge of that. Either way, this translation, I guess, was a lot more work than I anticipated. I tried my best aligning everything up the best I could. It is clunky in some parts, but you get the gist of it from the video. Just watch. Let me know what you think. And again, this is not my original video. I did transcribe the entire thing, and I ran the transcription through a translator, extracted that, and I plugged that into an AI voice generator. And this is how we have this voiceover. So hopefully you enjoy it. Make sure to check out the show, tjojp.com. Everything related to the show is on there. And yeah, make sure to follow the show on all social media platforms. If you're not subscribed already, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and see you on the next one.
Alchemy is known as an occult science, whose origin dates back to the dawn of time. It has always been surrounded by a large land made of wonder. The legend would have it that it was God himself who revealed its secrets to Adam. Alchemy is at the same time an authentic science, with its laboratory work a sacred art, but also a philosophy, a spirituality that rests on a bond uniting man to the universe, to nature and its forces. The alchemist works in osmosis with nature. He claims to uncover a part of its mysteries, and by exploiting its powers and virtues, would attempt to complete it by accelerating its processes. The most enigmatic goal of alchemy is the fabrication of the philosopher's stone or groundwork, supposed to be able to transmute base metals into gold, but also to obtain an elixir of long life, or the panacea, a kind of universal medicine for those who practice it. Alchemy would also be the transmutation of the spirit for a spiritual awakening. Paracelsus, the famous alchemist of the 16th century, would have even stated, "No one can transmute matter unless he has transmuted himself." To reach the philosopher's stone or grand work, there are two alchemic paths. One is the dry path. It is the work in the crucible and the high-temperature furnace that will lead us to the hypothetical attainment of the panacea and to the transmutation of metals, especially mercury, into gold. The other is the wet path with flasks or retorts and at low temperature. The wet path includes a significant component, spagyrics, which is an alchemic application for therapy using various various pharmacopoeias, all while continuing to work towards the attainment of the philosopher's stone. Patrice Patamian-Mian, located near Vienne in Isère, a student of the famous contemporary alchemist Armand Barbeau, is developing significant spagyric work based on the quintessence of plants and metallic elixirs. For him, as for many alchemists, their works are true vocations. Generally, it comes to you in a quite spontaneous way, but there is a ground, certainly a fertile soil. It is undoubtedly the love for nature. It is also the attraction to somewhat mysterious things, perhaps towards the supernatural, and especially when one is a child or teenager with a very, very strong imagination. Some of these disciplines are extraordinary nourishments, and for my part, this is somewhat what happened. Nature is much older than man. It would be the mother. But it is also the child, meaning that it has the qualities of both one and the other. For alchemists, everything that nature produces is sacred. Each one works on a medium, a metal, a mineral, or a material. Patrice Paran chose the path of peats, that is to say, earth taken from a preserved area to which he adds plants that he lets macerate for months and years. This accelerates the natural process of putrefaction and the concentration of energy that the plants draw from the soil. And for this harvest, the favorable astrological period is spring. Under the zodiac signs of Aries and Taurus, the harvested plants are carefully selected. They are always very young plants, which have very few branches, very few stems, but which, on the other hand, have a very deep root system, allowing them to draw from the earth the energies and vital forces that are needed. This energy that the plant stores, it owes indirectly to the sun and the moon playing the role of a mirror. This infusion of lunar energy, it is vital in the transportation of the energy that we need. It is sometimes almost a romantic feeling that can connect the alchemist with nature. Nature is taken and considered as a living being, sometimes as a full-fledged person. It has incredible richness, boundless generosity, and the alchemist, who spends his life within nature, eventually understands its generosity, its availability, its fragility. And that is why every time an alchemist works, whether collecting a mineral, a metal, or a plant, they must do so with the utmost respect. Contemplation is necessary, and one can call it an inner prayer, which varies according to individual sensitivity. It can be simple or complex, but it's like reuniting with a loved one. And then, there is something, a particular emotion that arises automatically. All these connections lead to a kind of philosophical marriage, establishing between nature and the alchemist. Nature provides all the necessary elements for the alchemists in their work. An essential step is the collection of dew. This step takes place in spring. Its purpose is to collect a specific type of water that will allow treatment of all materials, no matter the chemical paths chosen here. So you see the alchemists, you also see animals. These are the astrological signs, and here it refers to spring. And you also see something very important. It is this particular fan representing, symbolizing the celestial influx. That is to say, all the energy descending from the universe, from the cosmos, and which comes to bathe the earth and consequently to infuse into the dewdrops. The collection is done at the break of dawn, before the sunrise. The dew contains a salt, it contains a fire, and it is this fire that will allow the plants to be burned, digested, absorbed by the peat. It is the one that will also transmit its very specific portion of energy and contribute to the maturation of the compost. This process allows for the collection of a lot of dew. We touch soil clumps, we collect soil essentially. So what needs to be done immediately afterward is filtration, and then we have a dew that is clear and limpid. After various harvests in nature, it's time to move to the laboratory. In each pathway, there are 3 distinct and separate stages, called work in alchemical language, in the wet pathway of the peats. The first work, named the black work, consists of putrefying soil and plants with the energy contained in the dew to obtain a solvent that allows extracting the specific color of the metals or tint. 30 years ago, 3 kilograms of soil were taken from nature, and over all these years they have received plants and dews to be enriched. We arrive at a matter that is extremely black, extremely rich, containing powerful salts that will allow the development of elixirs. The objective is to arrive at this peat, at this compost, extremely fertile. Having reached its maturity, the metallic elixirs can be prepared. It starts with the separation of the black waters from the peat. They are of the added dew that has absorbed the color after the calcination of a certain quantity of peat. The obtained ash is introduced into a test tube filled with the distilled dew and the powdered metal. Here, tin. These tubes are then placed in an oven. After a few hours of cooking, these tubes are emptied, filtered under vacuum. And there we obtain an elixir after a few weeks of decanting. The preparations are immediately usable. Tin traditionally corresponds to the biliary pathways, and this particular preparation also has virtues regarding the possibilities of eradicating certain bacteria, such as golden staph, for example. Here is another preparation based on silver. The silver, in turn, will be used to treat pathologies related to the brain, the nervous system. The spagyric work is finished. It is the end of the first work of the wet path, and this earth contained in these dark tones, we find it here partially evaporated. This is the alchemical earth. This alchemical earth. It is the primary material of the alchemists in this peat path, and this alchemical earth will give rise to the 2 principles of the work, that is to say, sulfur and philosophical mercury, which are the 2 main agents that contribute to the creation of the philosopher's stone. The work of the spagyric is very varied. Jean-Luc Steinmann, based in the Chambéry region, has focused on metallic and animal quintessences. Basil Valentine in the 15th century and Paracelsus in the century following practiced this natural medicine known as al-spag. They would have greatly contributed in their time to curb numerous scourges such as the plague, nervous disorders, epilepsy. Paracelsus healed through likes. He is really the ancestor of homeopathy. I am making an antimony vinegar. It is a sour wine because for the ancients, everything that was acidic was also called vinegar. But it's not vinegar in the sense of wine vinegar. It's not an acetate. It is used to extract metallic tinctures, and my use will be to dissolve gold to make a gold oil, and there are still about 3 weeks left since it takes a month. And this vagueness has the particularity of being non-toxic. Already, from a therapeutic point of view, it's important. It is not corrosive and it is non-toxic. It is a rejuvenator, generally the 4 senses of honey when it is finished. This, on the other hand, is honey. It is already a wonderful product since it is already fermented in the belly of bees. It is truly an alchemical product. In the true sense of the term, there is a huge vital force in honey. For the alchemists, nature is, in fact, the temple of the divine, where everything began, where everything will end, according to the alchemists. The divine would have put everything in nature that man needs for healing. Alchemical therapies are not only the pharmacopoeias obtained through spagyrics, but also the use of certain plants whose forms or particularities they interpret as signs suitable for various treatments. Paracelsus emphasizes one of them which will finally prevail, which is in fact what he calls the gift of heaven, donum celi, the celandine, the chelidonium, which is involved in many of these vegetable preparations. And this celandine, when broken, we see that its stem contains a yellow-greenish juice quite similar to the coloration of bile. Now this celandine, obviously by this coloration of its juice, presents quite particular analogies with bile, and so it is a quite remarkable hepatobiliary. This plant is solar, so the signature is obvious, and it is also therefore the wart herb. It has the property to heal the warts, and at the same time it is called the Great Enlightener. Nature, obviously, is always exalted by Paracelsus because, in fact, he tells us that there is a light that shines much more than the light of the sun. It is the light of nature, and it is in this light of nature that the invisible things become visible. It is then possible for the truly initiated alchemist to pierce, to actually perceive, through a kind of clairvoyance, the mechanisms of nature in the very light of nature. Patrick Riviere, based in the Limoges region, works on alchemy through both the wet method and the dry method. Throughout history, alchemists have shared, in addition to their osmosis with nature, a spirituality that is inseparable from their art. However, it can vary in essence and expression from one individual to another. Nature has an omnipresent soul. It permeates humans without them realizing it. It is somewhat the natural consciousness or spiritual consciousness or the consciousness of the sacred. In fact, the alchemist has a religion indeed, but religion in the sense of a relationship, a connection between nature, which is the cosmos, which is the earth, which is everything that exists in the universe, and himself. This privileged relationship has a connection with spirituality, but not a declared religion. That is to say, an alchemist can be Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, but he absolutely must be endowed with this spiritual consciousness that unifies all religions. The alchemist believes in a central entity, a point from which everything arrived, and this central point which is, of course, indefinable, incomprehensible to man. This point, we can effectively assimilate it to God, and I think that God is energy with a capital E. And it is from this energy that all other energies and all manifestations stem. Visible and invisible, energies are the real engine of all transformations. For most alchemists, the spirit of each living being would possess a part of this universal energy. In reality, there is not really any difference between spirit and matter. Even scientists today know very well that matter is condensed spirit. It's condensed energy. For alchemists, God necessarily exists. We can call it the force of life. We can call it the universal spirit. But it necessarily exists, but it is not necessarily external to us. Meaning, we are perhaps all gods, but we have forgotten it. We have descended so low into the matter after the fall that ultimately we have forgotten it, but by gradually rising again, one day we will remember it. Some people already remember it. Fortunately, they have paved the way. Jesus, Buddha, Akhenaton before him. Fortunately, they have paved the way. And it helps others. Then, in the end, in the universe, the whole world is connected. Even if we do not know it, all thoughts are connected. That's why everything interacts, especially for an alchemist. Everything resonates with everything. All the people who are closely interested in alchemy, they were attracted to alchemy like iron by a magnet. I think these are people who knew alchemy in another life. It is also true that many alchemists are reincarnations, and for me, it is not a concept, it is not a belief, it is a knowledge. The knowledge is direct and intuitive. It is something that you have experienced, and which is inscribed in your cells. The knowledge is effective. For their laboratory work, alchemists need to connect to spirituality, regardless of their religion or belief, in order to isolate themselves in a meditation atmosphere. Some even go so far as to have an oratory. In all religions, including Catholicism, one would find, according to the alchemists, a whole symbolism belonging to their science. Patrick Riviere deciphers it by interpreting it. Alchemy is somewhat at the heart of religions. Moreover, transubstantiation is a word that is very close to transmutation. The entire internal part of the Mass is, in fact, the realization of the great work for an alchemist, of course. So, in this Calvary, there is the sign where it is indicated Inri Jesus Nazarene, King of the Jews. But the alchemist sees something else. Igne natura renovatur integra. Nature is entirely renewed by fire, and also more precisely yet, ignis nitratur reatur. By fire, the nitra is revealed. Nitra and dew are essential in the development of the great work. Alchemists deliberately express themselves in a hermetic language through symbols and allegories. They use them to trigger reflective thinking in receptive individuals, helping them to understand their message in alchemy. Animals bear symbols. In fact, the animals suggest these matters, like the soul, like the bear, like the boar, which also designate the alchemical matters. This category of donkeys indeed carries a cross on their back, and this cross is somewhat the image of the timid donkey from the Hermetic fables, that is to say, the antimony of the sages. There are actually quite wonderful animals in reality which belong to the marvelous wardrobe. Then the unicorn, what is interesting is, obviously its unicorn, its unique phallic and luminous horn, since the unicorn comes from like, which actually designates the light, its lock, the light, the dawn, the nascent dawn. So it's our spirit, it's the alchemical spirit. and our matter as it is white and realized and pure, obtained at the end of the first. There is also symbolism in the colors of nature. For example, the spectrum of the rainbow would decline the different shades that materials take in the stages that lead to the great work of symbols. Part of the spirituality and philosophy of the alchemists would have been taken up by fraternities such as the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. The latter would have gone as far as laboratory practice. The Freemasons would have stopped well before. The Freemasons have occluded the laboratory part somewhat, I mean the technical part, to prioritize the work of the spirit of the intellect. But relying on symbols that are essentially alchemical, the Freemasons have no other symbols than those of alchemical origin. Like any symbol, it is a support that allows reflection. A careful, interesting and nourishing reflection, but which, in my opinion, remains incomplete so that precisely the work of modifying the human being is complete. The Rosicrucian symbols of the 17th century are truly bearers of the alchemical message. All these symbols are of alchemical connotation, and I would even say only alchemical. Thus, for example, we find the macrocosm here represented by this six-pointed star, obviously, which is actually the very image of the relationships between the macrocosm, so the universe, and the microcosm, the five-pointed star on a human scale. And we find the alchemical symbols, namely mercury, sulfur, and obviously salt, which at the same time is the cruciferous globe, since the first material that will give birth to the philosopher's stone. Another emblematic symbol, the scallop shell of St. James. St. James of Compostela is the patron of alchemists. He is the bearer of the shell. This shell is the representation of the celestial flux, that is, of the universal spirit or of the Holy Spirit, and the way of Compostela. It is both an initiatory journey of a person who will carry out their great work by following various well-chosen stages on routes in France or in Europe, and then it's also a reminder that Compostela is also a compost, and therefore what happens in the journey that leads to Compostela is exactly the work that an alchemist does in his laboratory. All the different stages sort of mark the different stages of the alchemical laboratory. There will be the discovery of the path, purification as the approach progresses, the reflection of the walker. The alchemist does the same thing with his matter, and we reach the direction. What is it? It is the holy place, the equivalent of which is the alchemist's laboratory. Pilgrims who have decided to travel the paths of St. James of Compostela are far from all being mystics. For the most part, they are men or women who need to find another dimension to their life. At the end of the journey, they often would have obtained the key, the journey having transmuted their being. Calls to attention also, and not only for pilgrims, are the symbols engraved in the stone. Alchemy is at the heart of the concerns of the Middle Ages, and when Victor Hugo tells us in the Middle Ages, humanity knew nothing important that it did not write in stone. So we really enter into the mystery of the cathedrals, the mystery of the cathedrals, and the mystery that the companions left us over time in religious buildings, or sometimes even in more or less secular houses. I am thinking, for example, of the Hôtel L'Allemand in Bourges, where I also think of the Jacques Coeur Palace and the Manor of the Salamander, which was destroyed during the war, and many other philosophical dwellings in the Tarn-et-Garonne. The Saint-Pierre Abbey of Moissac is characterized by one of the most beautiful French architectural ensembles. These extraordinary Romanesque sculptures are an example of messages written in stone. They are located on a route of the ways of St. James. It is the gesture that each companion performs before continuing his journey to St. James of Compostela. So there is the symbol of Q or X, which perfectly designates the radiation of light. And these entangled lions can be interpreted according to alchemical hermeticism. as being indeed the green lion and the red lion above us. This tympanum, where the 24 elders of the apocalypse are represented, with astonishing musical instruments for the most part, a cup which obviously is the chalice, which of course designates the Grail, obviously, but also, of course, in fact, the crucible of the alchemists. One of the capitals in the cloister of the abbey depicts a symbolic and allegorical animal of alchemy. On this capital, one can clearly see the philosopher's dragon, which actually designates the first material of the grand alchemical work, this dragon or basilisk. It is depicted with scales, which actually suggest the primer, that is to say, the coarse mineral sulfur, and black that comes out of the mine, a current of thought. Surrealism would have been imbued with the symbols and spirit of alchemy. The Surrealists were absolutely inspired by alchemy. Moreover, the leader of the Surrealist movement, André Breton, will not hesitate to say that seeking the philosopher's stone is actually the best way to take a brilliant revenge on rationalism. And André Breton, therefore, will add that he himself is looking for the gold of time, that is to say, this kind of quintessence of a timeless time, if I may say so. Alchemical allegories would have inspired famous authors, it is true. For sabotage, it is even more true, one might say, in other tales by Perrault, the tales of my Merlot. I am thinking in particular of Donkey Skin, obviously, since the writer himself, that is to say Perrault, does not hesitate to write. If Donkey Skin was recounted to me, I would take extreme pleasure in it, meaning if this oral tale that he transcribed into writing was explained, clarified infinitely, he would take extreme pleasure because he would know at that moment how this donkey gives gold coins in its litter every morning. So it is evident that Donkey Skin, for example, is a hermetic tale by definition, meaning that it hides the reality of alchemical operations. The researches of the alchemists would not have stopped at the crucibles and test tubes. They claim that one of their own would have discovered the golden ratio or the divine proportions. It can be found everywhere, in the architecture of pyramids to that of Roman theatres. Painting also used it with Leonardo da Vinci. Literature as well, with, for example, the Divine Comedy by Dante. The golden ratio is a mystery to strive towards perfection. This golden number, it has been determined through the human body and through the proportions of the human body. So it's a composition of different measures that were taken on the arm and the hand, and the successive ratios of distance. For example, between the little finger, the thumb, between the little finger and the start of the wrist. The length of the forearm represented a certain length, that is to say, a series of ratios of square roots, fifth roots, and we get a number which is 1.61, and then some. Through the ages, the transmission of knowledge and practices was both bookish and oral. Some alchemists also claim to receive information from another world through the intermediary of a medium. Dreaminess, on the other hand, would be a constant. It would be translated by allegorical dreams interpreted by the alchemists as indications to follow for their progression towards the grand work. These dreams are part of their intimacy, and they avoid revealing the details. This dream, believe it, contained a good number of symbolic alchemical archetypes of a power that could leave no room for doubt upon my awakening. And it's true that there, I entered into an alchemical dimension that I did not suspect the day before. And the questions regarding alchemy seemed to become clearer, little by little, with an ease that amazed me. great French alchemists who have marked our contemporary era are Armand Barbault, who had students such as Patrice Partamian, Fulcanelli, who taught Eugène Cancelier, himself the master of Patrick Rivière. All the alchemists have had or have the goal of reaching the philosopher's stone, which would allow obtaining the elixir of long life and the transmutation of base metals into gold. Reality or legend, this questioning has spanned centuries. Exceptional testimony, and probably a world first, our alchemists will present before our camera the entire process up to realization. This implementation and the result obtained, which are startling, engage only their authors on the authenticity of the facts. The dry path involves 3 stages. The first, called the first work, starts with the indispensable harvesting of dew, as in the wet path. An umbrella, it had an excellent definition. It said that it was the result of the exudation of the stars, the sweeting of the stars, and Virgil, for his part, said the moon drunk with dew. So at the full moon, the dew is much more important and fertile. This is the very first operation that our matter or our philosophers' dragons undergo. It is a somewhat particular operation that is called where the matter cooks in its own juice, obviously aided by the dew. Then it will change color and it will sort of prepare for the great work afterwards. So it will be exposed. In the light of the moon and the stars, it will enter the great work. As prepared prima materia, the dew is also distilled to obtain a first salt, which will then be exposed in a solar oven. We are witnessing here the consolidation of the precious first salt derived from the dew. This is here the manifest proof that the great alchemical work is of solar essence. The sun is the father of the stone. The first obtained salt is white in color. The second one, ochre in color, is the result of another crystallization, always based on DW, therefore. The 2 salts both constitute the secret fire of the adepts to allow them to open their matter and to penetrate to the heart of the great work. So we see this dragon pulverized in the mortar. To attack this dragon, it will be necessary in the fire to add the knight's lance, which itself is reduced to powder, and to add the spiritual element, that is to say, the 2 salts. The first salt in the proportion of 15 and of the whole. That is to say, of the dragon and the knight armed with his lance, and the second salt, that is to say, half. This time of everything we leave, we make the mixture. The crucible, previously heated to red, will now welcome the materials into its womb in successive fractions. Hours pass before the end of the first purification. Now, we will operate the equation. To separate the white marrow from the cap of death, from the raven's head. Here is the first mercury. It is the same from the dead head, the cap.
Voilà le premier mercure,
We will now purify this mercury by adding the 2 salts. We will obtain a mercury that will be purified, more noble, more beautiful. And there we already have the first appearance of the mirror of the art. Our mercury is well purified. At the end of the second purification, our alchemists obtain the philosopher's emerald in vitriol. We get our vitriol instead of the dead hood. This substance is alive, and it is also the green lion. At the third purification, which concludes the first work, we finally obtain the Star of Compostela, or the Star of Philosophers.
Ainsi l'étoile de Compostelle.
Here is the Star of Compostela, Compost Star. The Black Virgin has transformed into the White Virgin. It is the nascent dawn, the light, the unicorn. For the second work, our alchemists calcine the slag, or hoods from the first work, to which they add the emerald, then the star. While melting, the star generates mercurial water. This, permeating the entire obtained substance, will give, after 7 to 9 sublimations, the ruby, which will be the germ of the philosopher's stone. This phase will take several days. We are in the process of extracting the germ of the philosopher's stone, also called the robs, the double thing, or the remo, or also the remora. Here are the saline compounds to form the shell of the third work. The third work, or the Great Coction, begins with the making of the philosophical egg, the partly constructed shell. The ruby will be positioned at a very precise location, kept secret by our alchemists. I will fill the upper part of the shell. There. There, the shell is finished, and it will now mature. In the wheel's fire, as the ancient alchemists said, we undertake the great option. So we set up the philosophical offering in its nest, not the wheel fool of the Great Coction continues. Here we are testing the temperature, which has greatly exceeded 400 degrees Celsius, so we reach a temperature of 525 to 530 degrees Celsius. Which is the hunger temperature of the coction. The collection being finished, I extract the crucible from the Tanner M furnace. Coction is the process of creating the philosopher's stone, which would initially allow us to obtain potable gold, universal medicine, or the elixir of long life. This elixir is obtained by diluting fragments of the red stone, The stone transmitted its tint to the monstrum used here, meaning in fact pure alcohol. According to the alchemists, the absorption of this elixir by a human being would trigger a series of metamorphoses. This man, under the effect of the elixir of long life, underwent transformations, including profuse sweating, which is always a sign of purification. Other transformations generally occur. The hair falls out, the nails as well, sometimes even the teeth. But hope is reborn in him. And because from his mouth comes out a filth, and the filth explains that something sacred is happening. And then, a few weeks later, once the great purge has taken effect, things return to their normal state. We see the result of the metamorphosis. We see the same old man rejuvenated. The arms are serene arms. And then above, we see the presence of an angel, meaning that we have left the earth to join the sky. The artist shows us that the adept is going to join the other reality, that is to say, this invisible world, the world of his origins, that is to say, the world of the primitive source that gave birth to all the life of the cosmos and to all life in general. When through the means of the elixir the alchemists speak of obtaining eternal life, it would not be earthly, but in another dimension, another world, with sometimes simple appearances among humans. The real question can be asked, is there a physical body, maintenance of the physical body, or a body of glory? Because all religious traditions allude to it. It is golden and glorious, as St. Paul envisages. That is to say, in fact, the glorious body of the being. So it could perhaps be a sort of not only transfiguration, but maybe resurrection, hence in a subtle body. Here is where alchemy engages us. So alchemy is much more even than a philosophy. It's a real mysticism. Obtaining the elixir would be, for the true alchemists, the real goal of their research. Besides the extraordinary ability to transmute the being, it would have for them the capacity to prolong life by regenerating cells and curing almost all diseases. A sample was submitted to chemists for analysis. We carried out in 2 stages a first direct analysis of organic volatile compounds and an indirect analysis by a somewhat particular technique that selectively analyzes everything that can be evaporated. The first part was to separate the constituents of the mixture. We first checked that there was indeed ethanol. We found this alcohol. We then looked at what other organic compounds there might be, and frankly, we didn't find much. We evaporated everything that was organic, including the solvent, and obtained this orange powder that we tried to analyze by X-ray diffraction. We got a response that matched quite well with what we had in the database. It would be erythrocytes, so an iron-based compound. Based on the statement of the components found in the analysis, of which a comprehensive list is scientifically very difficult, if not impossible, to establish. A doctor of pharmacy and toxicologist speaks on the therapeutic potential of the elixir. I remain really very skeptical of the therapeutic efficacy of this elixir. From an analytical point of view, what has been deduced was more mineral elements and no active medicinal principle. If therapeutic efficacy exists, it can be more attributed to the placebo effect rather than to the actual effect of a medication. So this product does not seem to be harmful, but it contains many mineral elements which, when administered in high concentration, will cause various disorders. The many mineral elements that have been detected in the analysis, such as antimony, iron and copper, are not taken into account in official medicine, except in homeopathy. Scientists and alchemists do not have the same approach to the active principles of plants and minerals. Only clinical experiences could resolve the controversy. For those who claim to be real alchemists, transmutation would in fact only be a means of testing the real capacities of the obtained stone. To increase its power to transmute into silver or gold, the philosopher's stone should undergo at least 3 multiplications, that is to say 3 new coctions, each with an addition of germ. Let's take out the philosophical egg and the phoenix, the parent stone.
Doit apparaître.
We are going to fragment it. Now, we see that it is actually a mass die. About 1 gram of projection powder extracted from the stone is wrapped in candle wax. It will subsequently be introduced into a crucible containing about 120 grams of mercury. Powder and mercury have been analyzed. They held no trace of gold. The mercury must be heated for several tens of minutes. The mercury having reached its boiling point and beginning to vaporize, the ball of wax containing the powder of the stone is projected into the crucible for the potential transmutation of a part of this vile metal to occur. The material being currently in perfect fusion, the transmutation is taking place, and we will not delay in making the casting. A 15th century alchemist, Nicole Lagro, among others, wrote, "Patience is the ladder of philosophers and humility, the door to their garden." The transmutation having been perfectly carried out, we make the casting. Gold appears. Is the 8-gram golden piece of metal fallen from the crucible indeed gold, as the alchemists claim? This sample was submitted to the scientists of the almost Mr. de Beer technology pole for analyses and investigations regarding its origin. This metallic sample is mainly made of gold, accounting for 80% also, 11% copper and 9% silver, so it is a sample that presents one that is 20 carats. We first conducted a visual examination of this sample, followed by an examination by optical microscopy with magnifications up to 1,000. So the optical microscope examination allowed us to reveal the structure of this material, which is a relatively compact structure and has a dendritic structure, that is to say, a raw solidification structure. This sample is indeed the result of a melting process, and then we conducted an analysis to determine its composition on an X-ray fluorescent spectrometer. Given the results we obtained, if there is a significant gold content in the sample we analyzed, it is because this gold content was present at the start of the process. Transforming vile metals into gold is an experience that has no formal proof to date. With the various analyses carried out during the alchemists' work, the results obtained may seem challenging. Their spirituality and mysticism can be subject to questions. It is up to everyone to interpret with free will a possible real transmutation for those who would have achieved it, impossible and false for others. Where is reality? Will we ever know it like all other myths, tales, or legends? Alchemy anchored in the mysteries of nature, and the cosmos opens the door to dreams. Is it really useful to close it again, to demystify it in one way or another? Aren't dreams essential to men to sometimes simply survive? With his wisdom, Gandhi managed to express a whole reflection in a simple quote: "Life must be a mystery to be lived, not a problem to be solved."